Welcome back, Lincoln currency. When you hold a coin, it is not just a piece of metal, it is not just a tiny disc that jingles in your pocket, it is a living story, a piece of history, a symbol of a nation's values, its struggles, its choices, and its changing times. And when we speak of the 1-cent coin from 1980, a penny that so many people overlooked and spent without a second thought, we are in fact opening a door into one of the most fascinating chapters of American numismatics. This coin, so small and so humble, has traveled across millions of hands, seen the inside of dusty piggy banks, fallen between car seats, been glued into coin albums, hidden in attics, and sometimes locked away in vaults, preserved in mint condition, glowing like a time capsule from the year it was struck. Now picture yourself in the United States in 1980. The economy was tense, inflation was real, the price of commodities like copper was climbing, and yet the mint continued to produce billions upon billions of these copper coins. Each one carried with it the weight of 3.11 grams, struck in an alloy of 95% copper and 5% zinc. That simple weight and composition made the coin more than just a unit of exchange. It made it a tangible commodity because the copper inside was slowly becoming more valuable than the denomination stamped upon it. The face of the coin bears Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, a man whose image has graced the cent since 1909. When Victor David Brenner's portrait was first introduced to honor Lincoln's 100th birthday. On this 1980 cent, Lincoln looks rightward, with a quiet dignity, framed by the word liberty on the left, the motto "I in God we trust" above his head, and the date, 1980, to his right shoulder. If the coin was minted in Philadelphia, there is no mint mark. If it came from Denver, a small D rests beside the date. If it is from San Francisco, the S mint mark identifies it as a proof, carefully struck for collectors with polished dies that leave mirrored fields and frosted details. Turn the coin over, and the reverse tells its own story. Instead of the wheat ears that appeared on Lincoln cents from 1909 until 1959, here we see the Lincoln Memorial, a solemn temple-like structure in Washington, D.C., designed by architect Henry Bacon. The design on the coin was created by Frank Gasparo, chief engraver of the United States Mint, and it is one of those clever reverses where if you look closely, you can actually see Lincoln seated inside the memorial between the central columns. The inscription United States of America arcs along the top, E pluribus unum rests above the memorial, and 1 cent is boldly declared at the bottom. It is a coin of continuity, design stability, and familiarity, yet behind it lies a brewing storm of economic and monetary change. Billions of these coins poured out of the mints. In Philadelphia alone, over 7.4 billion cents were struck in that single year. Denver followed with more than 5.1 billion. San Francisco produced a little over 3 million proofs for collectors. To give perspective, that means in one single year, over 12.5 billion pennies were created, each one identical in design, yet each one destined for its own journey. Think of the sheer volume of copper mined, smelted, transported, rolled into sheets, punched into planchets, and struck into coins just to meet the demands of commerce. The scale is breathtaking, and yet most of these coins were destined to be forgotten. But numismatics teaches us that what seems common is not always unremarkable. Condition changes everything. To find a 1980 cent in circulated form is to find an everyday coin worth a cent, maybe two, maybe nothing beyond its face value. But to find one in pristine mint state, a blazing red uncirculated coin with no spots, no scratches, no dulling, is to find something extraordinary. Collectors value these gems, and in the highest grades, a 1980 cent can command impressive sums. Certified MS-67 red examples can fetch hundreds of dollars. MS-67 plus pieces can soar into the thousands. Imagine a coin that millions ignored, a coin spent on candy or gum, suddenly turning into a four-figure collectible simply because it survived the decades untouched. And this is where myth and rumor begin to play their part. On the internet, stories circulate about pennies from 1980 being worth hundreds of thousands, or even millions of dollars. People claim that certain rare varieties or error coins have achieved astronomical prices, even whispering numbers like $654 million. But the truth, grounded in auction records and certified populations, is that while the 1980 cent has its valuable versions, none has come close to such unimaginable heights. The copper content itself is worth nearly 3 cents, and the collector market can lift specific high-grade or error coins into the thousands, but never into the realm of hundreds of millions. Yet we must not let fact rob the coin of its magic. Because part of the beauty of coin collecting, part of the reason why people search their change and fill coin rolls and attend coin shows, is that every single coin carries the chance, however small, of being that rarity, that error, that discovery. A doubled die, a dramatic off-center strike, a coin struck on the wrong planchet, all of these could elevate a simple penny into the realm of desirability. For the 1980 cent, known double dies are scarce but possible, minor repunched mint marks or die cracks can be found, and unique mis-strikes occasionally surface. It is this possibility that keeps the hunt alive, keeps people poring over their spare change under magnifying glasses, keeps collectors awake at night dreaming of the find. And so, the 1980 cent sits at a crossroads in history. Just 2 years later, in 1982, the U.S. Mint made the fateful decision to switch from copper alloy cents weighing 3.11 grams to copper-plated zinc cents weighing only 2.5 grams. That shift marked the end of an era, and suddenly, every cent dated before 1982 became something more than ordinary. They became, in essence, the last of the true copper cents, the last of the heavy coins, the last of the bronze that had been used since the Civil War era. The 1980 penny is part of that closing chapter, minted in abundance, yes, but tied forever to the larger story of America's changing coinage. So when you pick up a 1980 cent, do not dismiss it. Hold it to the light, admire the way the copper gleams when freshly struck or the way it tones into deep reds and browns with age. See Lincoln's face not just as an engraving, but as a statement about leadership and sacrifice. Look at the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse and see not just a building, but a national monument that has witnessed countless speeches, protests, and gatherings. Understand that the coin you hold is more than a cent, it is a chapter of American history condensed into 19 millimeters of metal, a tiny time traveler from an era of economic challenge and change. Think for a moment about how many stories are hidden in those billions of pennies from 1980. Each one may have begun its journey in the blazing coining presses of Philadelphia or Denver, struck with immense force between hardened dies, ejected onto conveyor belts, bagged in heavy cloth sacks, and shipped to banks across the country. Some went directly into circulation, handed out as change at gas stations and diners, slipping into registered drawers with metallic clinks. Others were rolled in paper tubes, stored in vaults, forgotten until the day they were released. Some found their way to children's piggy banks, some fell through floorboards, and some traveled halfway around the world in the pockets of travelers and servicemen. Every single penny has lived its own life, carrying faint traces of the hands it has touched and the places it has been. The weight of 3.11 grams may sound trivial, but when multiplied by billions, it represents mountains of copper pulled from the earth. Copper mines supplied the ore, smelters refined it, rolling mills pressed it into thin sheets, and blanking machines punched out the planchets. Every stage of production was a collaboration of industry and government to meet the insatiable demand for coinage. Because in 1980, cash was king. Debit cards were rare, electronic payments a novelty. Every purchase at the corner store, every bus fare, every newspaper machine relied on physical coins. The penny may have been the lowest unit of American currency, but it was everywhere, necessary for exact change, for vending machines, for tax calculations, for balancing the books to the last cent. And yet, even as the penny circulated by the billions, critics were raising their voices. Was the coin truly worth the cost? Even then, in the late 1970s and early 80s, the mint faced the problem that the raw copper in each penny approached or exceeded its face value. Imagine the irony, a coin that said 1 cent but contained nearly 3 cents worth of metal. If melted, a single penny might yield more value as raw material than as currency. Although melting cents for profit was illegal, the economic tension was clear. Newspapers published editorials about the waste of resources, politicians debated whether the denomination should be retired, and the Treasury explored alternatives. Indeed, there had already been experiments earlier in the decade. In 1974, the mint struck over 1 million aluminum cents as test pieces, hoping to reduce costs. But the lightweight coins proved unpopular, problematic in vending machines, and potentially hazardous if ingested. Most were destroyed, but a handful escaped destruction, making them legendary rarities in numismatics today. By 1980, however, no substitute had yet been adopted, so the mint pressed ahead with the tried-and-true copper alloy. Little did the public know that only 2 years later, the great changeover would come, and pennies would never again be quite the same. Collectors look back on this with fascination. They see the 1980 cent as part of the final act in a drama that began decades earlier. In mint sets and proof sets of that year, the coins shimmer with freshness, Lincoln's portrait sharp and frosted, the field's mirror-like or satin smooth. In circulation, though, the story is different. Billions of coins quickly wore down, their details fading, Lincoln's hair flattening, the steps of the memorial blending together until indistinct. By the mid-1980s, worn pennies from 1980 were already so common that nobody gave them a second glance. And that is precisely what makes pristine examples so prized. Rarity is not always about how many were made, but how many survive in perfect state. Picture a collector at a coin show today, leafing through a box of cents. Most of the coins are brown, nicked, and ordinary. But then the collector spots one that glows with original mint red, unmarked, almost luminous. That coin, properly graded and certified, could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. This is the allure, the idea that buried in a sea of commonality lies a shining gem, a treasure overlooked by countless others. For the 1980 cent, that treasure is not an error of history, but a survivor of time, a coin that avoided the bruises and scars of circulation. And yet, errors do exist, and they add a layer of excitement. There are 1980 cents with doubled die obverse where the date and letters show doubling under magnification. There are off-center strikes where the design is pushed to the edge, leaving part of the blank exposed. There are broad strikes without rims, clipped planchets with crescent-shaped bites missing, and even rare cases of coins struck on foreign planchets by mistake. These are the anomalies, the accidents of production that slip past inspectors, each one a curiosity commanding prices far beyond face value. Collectors dream of finding them in pocket change, and occasionally someone does. Now step back from the numismatic details and imagine the broader cultural role of the penny in 1980. It was the year of Ronald Reagan's election, the year of the Miracle on Ice at Lake Placid, the year Pac-Man was released to the world. A year of transition in politics, sports, technology, and culture. In the midst of these transformations, the penny remained a constant, a quiet witness to history. Children tossed them into fountains to make wishes. Street musicians lined their guitar cases with them. Clerks kept little dishes of pennies at cash registers with the sign "Take a penny, leave a penny." They were small tokens of generosity, superstition, and everyday commerce. And the coin from 1980 shares in all of that. It is both an artifact of economic history and a relic of daily American life. It is also a coin tied to symbolism. Abraham Lincoln on the obverse was more than just a portrait. It was the first time a real historical figure had been placed on a regular American coin, back in 1909, breaking with the earlier tradition of allegorical representations like liberty. By 1980, Lincoln had graced the cent for 71 years, becoming one of the most familiar images in American pockets. The reverse, too, was symbolic. The Lincoln Memorial, dedicated in 1922, had become a site of speeches and protests, a backdrop for the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech, and countless national gatherings. Every time someone looked at the back of a penny, they were seeing not just a building, but a stage of American democracy. All of this converges in the 1980 cent: the economics of copper, the artistry of design, the drama of high mintages, the subtle rarity of condition, the thrill of errors, and the cultural symbolism of Lincoln himself. It is a coin that, while common, embodies uncommon meaning. And though myths about its value reaching hundreds of millions are exaggerations, the truth is still captivating enough. A coin worth 1 cent can, under the right circumstances, be worth 100, 1,000, or more. A coin struck by the billions can still hide within it mysteries and treasures. And a coin so ordinary in appearance can become, in the eyes of those who look closely, extraordinary. Think about the journey of the penny not just in America, but across the world. The United States 1-cent coin has always traveled far beyond its borders. Soldiers in 1980 carried them overseas, tucked in their pockets as lucky charms. Tourists scattered them in foreign countries as tips or souvenirs, small copper ambassadors of the American economy. Even today, you can sometimes stumble upon a Lincoln cent in the change of a shopkeeper in Europe, Asia, or Latin America, evidence of how money circulates globally when carried in the hands of travelers. The 1980 penny, struck by the billions, was among those most widely scattered, and its sheer numbers meant it had a chance to touch lives in distant lands, often unnoticed but always present, and within the United States, its role in everyday life was profound. Children in the schoolyards of 1980 traded them for bubblegum, counted them carefully when saving up for comic books, and stored them in glass jars that rattled with the weight of possibility. Parents reminded their children of the old saying, "A penny saved is a penny earned," echoing Benjamin Franklin's wisdom. Pennies found on sidewalks were picked up as tokens of good luck, heads-up pennies especially treasured. They were part of rituals, part of sayings, part of culture. Even those who thought of them as nearly worthless still held onto them because they were part of life, because they made exact change, because they filled piggy banks and added up slowly into dollars. The 1980 penny also connects us to a broader debate about the future of money. As costs rose, critics questioned whether the penny should even continue to exist. Was it practical to mint billions of coins that people hardly noticed or valued? Was it efficient to spend more on metal and production than the coin was worth in commerce? These debates echo into the present, where in 2025 the U.S. Mint has already announced the discontinuation of the penny beginning in 2026. When we look back at coins like the 1980 cent, we realize they are not just objects but symbols of an economic era that is ending. They remind us that even the smallest denominations are subject to the pressures of inflation, commodity prices, and government policy. For collectors, however, these coins become more than economic units. They become history you can hold. A 1980 cent in mint condition tells the story of a year when copper was still king, when Lincoln's portrait had already reigned on the cent for over 70 years, and when the Lincoln Memorial reverse was still decades away from being replaced by the Lincoln Bicentennial and Union Shield designs. It captures a precise moment before change arrived, before the switch to zinc planchets, before design overhauls. It is, in a sense, a frozen moment, one of the last gasps of the old era of American coinage. The artistry of the coin deserves appreciation. Victor David Brenner's original Lincoln design, chosen in 1909, was controversial at first because it marked the first time a president appeared on circulating coinage. Yet by 1980, it was so deeply ingrained in American life that people barely thought twice about it. The detail of Lincoln's face, the way his beard curls, the subtle lines of his suit, all are miniature works of engraving. Frank Gasparo's reverse, though sometimes criticized for being architectural rather than artistic, nonetheless carried powerful symbolism. The Lincoln Memorial had been the site of iconic civil rights demonstrations, presidential speeches, and moments of national unity. Every penny from 1959 to 2008 carried that image, and the 1980 issue is right in the heart of that long tradition. The penny also teaches us lessons about value perception. Most people look at a 1980 cent and see 1 cent, nothing more. Yet numismatists know to look deeper. Is the color original red or has it toned to brown? Are there contact marks, scratches, or spots? Is the strike sharp, with clear steps on the memorial, or is it weak and flat? Under magnification, does the date show signs of doubling? Does the mint mark look repunched? These subtle details can transform a coin's value from negligible to significant. It is a reminder that value is not just inherent but interpreted, shaped by knowledge, context, and condition. What one person spends thoughtlessly, another person treasures, and beyond condition, the sheer nostalgia tied to a coin can magnify its importance. For someone who was a child in 1980, a penny from that year may be the first coin they remember holding, the first money they saved, the first contribution they made to buying something of their own. For someone born in 1980, the penny with their birth year carries sentimental value, a tiny link to their beginnings. Collectors often seek coins from their birth year or from the years significant in their family's life: wedding years, graduation years, milestone years. In this way, the 1980 cent becomes not just an object of numismatic study but a vessel of personal memory, infused with meaning that transcends its face value. The penny also played roles in games, tricks, and even science projects. Teachers used them in math classes to teach addition, subtraction, and multiplication. Science teachers used copper pennies in chemistry experiments, demonstrating oxidation, cleaning them with vinegar and salt, or transforming their surface with zinc plating and heat to show changes in metal chemistry. Magicians used pennies for sleight of hand tricks, vanishing them from palms or pulling them from behind children's ears. In each of these roles, the 1980 penny, indistinguishable from any other year to most eyes, nonetheless carried its weight, participating in moments of learning, wonder, and fun. Now imagine the millions of pennies from 1980 still in existence today. Many sit in coffee cans in garages, in shoeboxes tucked into closets, in glass jars on kitchen counters. They wait, quietly, until someone counts them, sorts them, or rolls them for deposit. In those moments, collectors often intercept them, scanning dates, searching for gems. Somewhere out there, perhaps in a forgotten jar, lies an MS-67 red 1980 cent, waiting to be discovered, waiting to dazzle with its brilliance under a grading company's spotlight. The odds may be slim, but the possibility is real, and that possibility is what keeps the hunt alive. This coin is a paradox. It is utterly common, and yet, in the right circumstances, it is remarkably valuable. It is small and nearly weightless, yet it represents immense history and cultural symbolism. It is dismissed by millions as pocket change, yet treasured by collectors as a link to America's past. The 1980 cent is all of these things at once, a contradiction and a celebration, a coin that deserves more attention than it gets. And as we hold it, study it, and reflect on it, we begin to understand that no coin is truly ordinary if we take the time to see the story it carries. The 1980 penny also invites us to think about the passage of time. 45 years may not seem like a long span in the grand arc of history, but in terms of daily life, it marks a profound shift. In 1980, telephones were still attached to walls, letters were written on paper, and the world of computers was in its infancy. Gasoline was under $1 a gallon, and a penny could still buy a piece of candy in certain places. Fast forward to today, and the penny seems almost powerless in commerce, unable to buy anything on its own, often discarded in parking lots or left behind on store counters. The coin itself has not changed, but the world around it has transformed, and so its meaning has shifted from utility to symbolism. It is a reminder of how money is tied not only to value but to time, context, and memory. This is why the 1980 cent has become so fascinating to collectors and storytellers alike. It is not just about the metal, not just about the price guides, not just about mintage figures. It is about what the coin represents: a window into a specific year, a year of economic uncertainty, a year of cultural milestones, a year when billions of tiny copper tokens carried the faith of a nation in its currency. Each penny was a promise that value could be measured, traded, and trusted. Each penny was a tool in the massive machine of commerce, and each penny was a reminder of Lincoln's legacy, standing as a figure of unity and perseverance during one of America's darkest periods, the Civil War. The weight of 3.11 grams may seem small, but consider the billions of grams when multiplied by the total production of that year. It is as though mountains were reshaped and transformed into coins that entered the flow of life. To hold a single penny from 1980 is to hold a fragment of that massive effort, a fragment of Earth's copper forged into national currency. It carries a geological history as much as a political one. The copper once lay hidden in veins of rock, extracted by miners, refined by smelters, and turned into sheets at great industrial facilities. Then, under the strike of minting presses delivering tons of force, it was shaped into a symbol recognized across the world. All of that energy, all of that history, is condensed into a disc no larger than a fingertip. And because the coin is so small, people often overlook the artistry involved. Look closely at the obverse, and you will see Brenner's initials, tiny letters VDB, originally placed boldly on the reverse in 1909 and later moved to the shoulder truncation on Lincoln's bust. They are almost invisible to the casual eye, but they are there, a signature of the artist, a reminder that every coin is not just an economic tool but also a work of art. On the reverse, the lines of the Lincoln Memorial stand in geometric precision, columns evenly spaced, steps carefully aligned. If you take a magnifying glass, you can actually glimpse the seated statue of Lincoln inside the memorial, an extraordinary detail that most people never notice in their lifetimes. This hidden Lincoln within the Lincoln is a masterpiece of miniature engraving, a coin within a coin, a portrait within a monument, and it makes the 1980 cent not just a common object but a secret marvel. The market value of the coin in modern times depends heavily on condition and rarity of errors. Circulated pieces are worth 1 cent, perhaps 3 cents if you melt down the copper value, though melting is prohibited by law. Uncirculated coins in high grades, especially those with the bright red luster preserved, can command far higher prices. Certified coins graded by professional services like PCGS or NGC at MS67 red are highly prized, often fetching hundreds of dollars. On rare occasions, MS67 plus examples reach into the thousands. Proof coins from San Francisco, struck in small numbers compared to the billions of business strikes, shimmer with mirror-like fields and frosted devices, making them favorites among collectors who prize their beauty as much as their rarity. And error coins, those off-center strikes, doubled dies, broad strikes, or clipped planchets, create moments of excitement, drawing bids from collectors who crave the unusual. But beyond the numbers, beyond the auction records, lies the emotional market, the way people feel about this coin. Some collectors pursue 1980 cents because it was the year they were born. Others seek it because it represents the last few years of the full copper alloy. Still others hunt it for the challenge of assembling complete sets, filling albums with every date and mint mark of Lincoln cents, spanning more than a century. For these collectors, each coin is a story, and the 1980 cent is a crucial chapter in that story. It is not just about price, it is about connection, memory, and meaning. Think also of the paradox of abundance. With billions of coins struck, the 1980 penny seems overwhelmingly common. And yet, when you search for perfect examples, when you demand flawless surfaces, brilliant luster, and sharp strikes, suddenly rarity appears. Out of billions, only a handful remain in pristine condition, unscathed by circulation, untouched by careless handling, unclouded by environmental damage. This is the great irony of numismatics, that the most common coin can produce the rarest survivors, and that rarity lies not in absolute numbers but in condition. It is why collectors obsess over details, why they examine coins under microscopes, why they send coins to grading companies. Because within the ocean of ordinary lies the island of extraordinary, and finding that island is the thrill of the hunt. And so the 1980 penny is not just a coin but a metaphor. It is a lesson about looking closely at the overlooked, about finding value in the ordinary, about recognizing history in the smallest places. It shows us that even the lowest denomination can carry the highest meaning, that even the tiniest disk of copper can reflect the weight of a nation's history, its economy, its art, and its memory. To dismiss the penny as worthless is to dismiss the stories it tells, and to honor it is to honor not just a coin but an entire tradition of coinage, artistry, and national identity. There is a certain mythology that surrounds the 1980 penny, and it often emerges in stories passed around online or whispered between collectors. People love to imagine that somewhere, hidden in circulation, there is a penny worth millions, even hundreds of millions. Tales circulate about coins supposedly valued at $654 million, numbers so astronomical they surpass even the most legendary rarities in numismatics. In reality, no such sale has ever occurred, and no coin from 1980 has achieved anything close to that figure. Yet the persistence of these myths tells us something important. It tells us that people are captivated by the idea of hidden treasure, by the dream that something so small and ordinary could secretly hold unimaginable wealth. And in a way, that dream is not entirely false. Because while the market does not support those mythic valuations, the truth remains that some pennies from 1980 can command sums far beyond what anyone would expect from a coin worth 1 cent. Auction records show pristine mint-state coins graded at the highest levels fetching 4 figures. Era coins, such as dramatic off-center strikes or rare doubled dies, can climb into the hundreds or even thousands. To the person who finds such a coin in their change, that discovery feels like winning a tiny lottery, a sudden transformation of the everyday into the extraordinary. And so the myth lives on because at its heart lies the truth that ordinary coins can hold extraordinary surprises. This raises an important question: what is value? Is it the face value stamped on the coin? Is it the metal content inside the copper disc? Is it the price a collector is willing to pay at auction? Or is it something deeper, sentimental, historical, symbolic? For the 1980 penny, all of these layers of value coexist. Its face value is 1 cent. Its metal value is closer to 3 cents at current copper prices, though melting is restricted. Its collector value ranges from cents to thousands, depending on grade and rarity. And its sentimental value is immeasurable, tied to birth years, memories, and personal stories. Value is not a single number but a spectrum, and the 1980 penny is a perfect example of how something so small can embody so many different kinds of worth. Let us also think about the place of the penny in the American imagination. For generations, it has been more than just a coin. It has been a symbol of thrift, a metaphor in sayings, a token in superstitions. Find a penny, pick it up, all day long you'll have good luck. That phrase alone has made countless people bend down to pick up a coin that others would step over. Pennies have been pressed into souvenirs at amusement parks, stretched and stamped with images of landmarks. They have been tossed into fountains, buried in the foundations of new houses for good luck, and slipped under the tongue of the dead in echoes of ancient traditions. The 1980 cent shares in all of this cultural weight, indistinguishable in ritual from pennies of other years, yet still participating in the long human habit of finding meaning in small coins. And in the grander history of Lincoln cents, the 1980 issue holds its place as part of the late Memorial Reverse era. Beginning in 1959, the Lincoln Memorial replaced the wheat ears on the reverse, shifting the imagery from agriculture to architecture, from the symbolism of growth and harvest to the symbolism of memory and monument. For nearly 50 years, this design dominated the reverse of the penny, until 2009 when special bicentennial designs were issued for Lincoln's 200th birthday, and in 2010 when the shield design debuted. Looking back, the 1980 penny sits firmly in the middle of that era, neither the beginning nor the end, but the heart of the tradition. It carries the legacy of both Brenner and Gasparo, the artists whose designs framed the coin for a century. When you hold the 1980 penny today, it is easy to forget just how old it is. Coins are durable, and they circulate for decades, so it is not unusual to still find them in change. Yet each one has lived through over 40 years of history. It has seen the fall of the Berlin Wall, the rise of the Internet, the dawn of smartphones, the tragedy of September 11th, and the turbulence of global markets. It has passed through hands during recessions and booms, wars and peacetimes, cultural shifts and technological revolutions. It is a survivor, and every scratch and ding on its surface is a scar from that journey. And yet, some pennies avoided that journey entirely. Mint sets, proof sets, hoarded rolls, and forgotten stashes preserved coins in pristine condition. These are the coins that today bring premiums, the coins that allow us to see what a 1980 cent looked like the day it left the press. Brilliant luster radiates from the fields, details are sharp and untouched, and the coin seems alive in its perfection. These coins are not just currency, they are artifacts, snapshots of craftsmanship frozen in time. For collectors, acquiring one is not just about investment, but about connection to history, about the joy of holding something pure and unspoiled from a distant year. The 1980 penny also teaches us about change, not just in coinage, but in society. In the late 20th century, the penny was still vital for daily commerce, but today many businesses round transactions to the nearest nickel. Many countries have eliminated their smallest coins altogether, and the US itself is on the cusp of retiring the cent permanently. That means coins like the 1980 penny will soon become relics of a bygone era, tokens of a time when every cent mattered, when people carefully counted exact change, when the smallest unit of money was still respected. To future generations, these coins may appear as curiosities, artifacts from an age before digital payments and invisible transactions. To us, they are still familiar, but that familiarity is fading, and that makes them all the more valuable to study and preserve. The myths of immense value will continue to swirl around coins like the 1980 penny. Stories of multi-million-dollar sales will be repeated, exaggerated, embellished. And while those specific claims may be false, they keep alive the excitement, the sense of wonder, the idea that treasure may be hiding in plain sight. That idea is powerful, because it reminds us to look closely, to value the overlooked, to seek stories in the ordinary. The 1980 cent is a perfect vessel for that lesson, a coin that teaches us that value is not always what is written on the surface, but what is discovered beneath. The 1980 penny also opens the door to a larger conversation about metal, economics, and the way resources shape currency. At its heart, the penny is nothing more than copper and zinc shaped into a disc. But when you trace the history of copper itself, you discover a metal that has shaped civilization for thousands of years. Copper was one of the first metals ever smelted by humans, used in the Bronze Age, carried in trade networks that spanned continents, and valued not only for its durability but for its beauty. In the United States, copper was abundant, mined from great deposits in Michigan, Arizona, and Montana, and it became a foundation for coinage, wiring, construction, and countless industries. When the penny was struck in 1980, it represented not just 1 cent of currency but also the weight of a natural resource tied to global supply and demand. By the late 1970s, the cost of copper was rising, pushing the mint to rethink its approach. At 3.11 grams each, with 95% of that being copper, every penny was essentially a tiny ingot of metal with a market value close to its face value. If copper prices rose too high, the cost of making a penny could exceed its worth, threatening the economics of the mint. This tension is why, just 2 years later, in 1982, the composition was changed to copper-plated zinc, reducing the actual copper content drastically while preserving the outward appearance. The 1980 penny thus stands at the edge of that transition, one of the last years where a coin truly carried a significant measure of copper weight, making it especially desirable to collectors and historians. And copper itself has a fascinating symbolism. It is a conductor, carrying electricity and energy. It is also a metal associated with luck, healing, and prosperity in cultures across the world. In ancient Rome, coins were struck from bronze and copper long before silver or gold became the standard for wealth. To hold a penny made mostly of copper is to hold continuity with that ancient tradition, a reminder that civilizations across millennia have relied on this reddish metal as a measure of value. The 1980 penny, then, is not only American but universal, connected to the long human story of copper coinage stretching back thousands of years. Now think about the global perspective on small denomination coins. The United States is not unique in facing debates about the penny's usefulness. Many nations have eliminated their lowest coins because inflation has eroded their buying power. Canada retired its penny in 2012, rounding transactions to the nearest 5 cents. Australia did away with its 1 and 2 cent coins back in the 1990s. New Zealand followed suit. Across Europe, with the introduction of the euro, debates about the 1 and 2 cent coins continue, with many countries effectively sidelining them in practice. In this context, the American penny, and specifically the 1980 penny, stands as a relic of a time when small change still mattered, when coins were an essential part of commerce rather than an afterthought. For collectors, this context adds another layer of significance. They see the 1980 cent not just as a coin but as a survivor of an endangered species. Each year that discussions of eliminating the penny resurface in Congress, the cultural importance of earlier issues grows. Someday, perhaps soon, the penny will no longer be struck for circulation, and then coins like the 1980 cent will mark the end of an era, preserved in albums and collections as representatives of a time when every cent counted. The modern market for the 1980 penny is a curious one. On the one hand, billions exist, and circulated examples remain plentiful, with little premium over face value. On the other hand, the top condition coins, the ones graded as superb gems with blazing red color, are scarce and highly prized. Collectors willing to pay hundreds or even thousands for a single specimen are not simply buying metal. They are buying rarity, beauty, and a guarantee of excellence certified by experts. These high-grade coins become trophies, symbols of achievement within a collection, proof that among billions of ordinary pieces, a gem has been found and preserved. Error coins from 1980 add another layer of intrigue to the market. Off-center strikes, where part of the design is missing, reveal the mechanical realities of the minting process. Double-struck coins, where two impressions overlap, create ghostly images that fascinate collectors. Doubled dies, where letters and numbers appear duplicated due to hubbing errors, are especially prized, often commanding hundreds or thousands of dollars depending on visibility. And then there are clipped planchets, where the coin was struck on an incomplete blank, leaving a curved bite missing from the edge. Each of these errors transforms an otherwise common penny into a unique artifact, a one-of-a-kind survivor of an industrial accident. The thrill of finding such a coin in pocket change is what fuels many collectors' passion, and the 1980 cent provides fertile ground for that search. But perhaps the most compelling reason the 1980 penny endures in collectors' imaginations is because it sits at the crossroads of multiple stories. The story of Lincoln and American history, the story of copper and economics, the story of numismatic artistry, the story of global coinage trends, and the story of ordinary people dreaming of extraordinary discoveries. It is not just a coin, it is a symbol of continuity and change, of permanence and impermanence, of value both real and imagined. To speak of $654 million may be an exaggeration, a myth spun by headlines and rumors, but it captures the emotional truth that to someone, somewhere, the 1980 penny is priceless. It might be the coin they carried as a child, the coin they found on the street before a lucky day, the coin that marked their birth year, or the coin that sparked their interest in numismatics. In those personal connections, the penny transcends its material form and becomes something greater, a token of memory, a charm of luck, a bridge between past and present. And so, the 1980 cent continues to live not just in collections, not just in bank vaults, not just in rolls of coins sitting forgotten in drawers, but in the stories we tell about it. Every time someone bends to pick up a penny from the ground, every time someone searches through change for rare dates, every time a collector turns a coin under the light to admire its luster, the 1980 penny gains new life. It is history still in circulation, value still in motion, and meaning still unfolding. There is something deeply human about the way we respond to small things that carry big stories. The 1980 penny is a perfect example of this paradox. It is small enough to lose between couch cushions, light enough to be carried unnoticed in the bottom of a pocket, common enough to be passed over without a second glance. And yet, when someone takes the time to stop, pick it up, and look closer, it reveals layers of history, economy, art, and memory that stretch far beyond its 1-cent face value. This is the magic of coins, and especially of those coins like the 1980 cent that bridge the line between everyday object and historical artifact. They are both trivial and profound, simple and complex, common and precious all at once. When you speak to collectors about how they started, many will tell you that it began with something just like this: a penny found on the ground, a jar of change emptied on a kitchen table, a moment of curiosity sparked by a date on a coin. A child in the early 1990s might have opened a dusty jar and poured out a mountain of pennies, sorting them by year and mint mark, learning to read those tiny letters: D for Denver, P for Philadelphia, S for San Francisco. That child might have stopped at a 1980 coin and wondered what the world was like when that penny was new. And in that moment, they were no longer just looking at money, they were touching time. The coin became a time machine, carrying them backward into a world they had never known, yet could now hold in the palm of their hand. And in the case of the 1980 cent, the stories it could tell are endless. It could have been struck in the Great Denver Mint, a massive facility that hums with the sound of presses stamping out coins by the millions each day. Or it could have been born in the historic Philadelphia Mint, the oldest mint in the United States, a place where coinage has been crafted since the days of George Washington. From there, it could have traveled to any corner of the country, tucked in a cashier's drawer in New York City, dropped into a payphone in Los Angeles, used to buy a stick of gum in a small town in the Midwest, or passed through countless hands at a gas station in Texas. Each coin's journey is unique, invisible, and unknowable, yet it leaves faint marks, a scratch, a dent, a softening of detail, each one a fingerprint of its life in circulation. Some 1980 pennies avoided circulation altogether. They were caught early by collectors or set aside in bank-wrapped rolls, saved by people who had a feeling that maybe, someday, these coins might matter. And for those coins, the story is different. Instead of scratches and dents, they carry original mint luster, that satiny red gleam that only untouched copper has. Their surfaces are like mirrors of time, perfectly reflecting the way the coin looked the instant it left the dies. These coins tell a story not of journeys but of preservation, of being saved, protected, and eventually rediscovered. When such a coin is submitted to a grading company and receives a high grade, MS66 red, MS67 red, perhaps even MS67 plus, it becomes a treasure, not because of rarity in mintage, but because of rarity in condition. Out of the billions minted, only a tiny handful survive in that perfect state. Then there are the stories of people who stumbled upon error coins. Imagine someone sorting through their change and noticing that the penny in their hand looked strange. Maybe the date appeared doubled, the numbers thickened and ghost-like. Maybe the coin was missing part of its edge, or the design was off-center. Curious, they searched online and discovered that such errors were not only interesting but valuable. They posted a photo to a coin forum, received feedback from experts, and learned that their find was worth far more than a cent. In that moment, they crossed the threshold, from casual observer to budding numismatist, from spender to keeper, from passerby to storyteller. And the coin that sparked that journey might well have been a 1980 penny, one of the most widely available yet surprisingly rich coins in circulation. This transformation, from money to memory, from object to artifact, is what makes numismatics such a powerful hobby. It is not just about collecting things. It is about connecting to the past, to the people who used those coins, to the hands that held them, to the events that surrounded their creation. When you hold a 1980 penny, you are holding the product of a specific moment in American history. It was the year Mount St. Helens erupted in Washington state, the year the United States boycotted the Moscow Olympics, the year Ronald Reagan was elected president. It was a year of inflation, energy crises, and shifting global dynamics. And yet, through all of that, the mint quietly produced billions of small copper coins, each one stamped with the face of Abraham Lincoln and the words, "In God we trust, liberty," and "United States of America." They were a constant in a time of change, a reassurance of continuity in a world in flux. And because they were so common, people rarely stopped to think about them. But now, decades later, they have become windows into that world. A 1980 penny is like a fossil of the economy, preserving in its metal the composition choices of the mint, the technological limitations of the presses, the artistry of its engravers, and the priorities of a nation that still believed in the value of even the smallest unit of currency. For someone born in 1980, that coin is a birth year token, a symbol of beginnings. For someone who grew up in that decade, it is a reminder of childhood, of allowances and vending machines and penny candy. For someone collecting today, it is a challenge to find the best example, to discover an error, to preserve a piece of history before it disappears from circulation forever. Even the feel of the coin in your hand tells a story. Copper pennies from before 1982 feel slightly heavier than the zinc pennies that followed. The difference is only fractions of a gram, but in the hand it is real. Collectors can often tell just by touch whether a penny is solid copper or copper-plated zinc. The 1980 cent, at 3.11 grams, carries that traditional heft. It feels solid, grounded, real. It connects you to the era when coins were made to last, when their metal content was considered as important as their face value. That physical sensation, the weight, the texture, the sound of a copper penny dropped on a tabletop, becomes part of the sensory memory that keeps collectors engaged. It is not just what the coin looks like, but how it feels and sounds that gives it its character, and all of this feeds into the psychology of collecting. Humans are natural pattern seekers, story collectors, memory archivists. We are drawn to things that seem ordinary but hide secrets, to objects that can be arranged in order, categorized, and preserved. The Lincoln Cent series is perfect for this instinct. It spans more than a century, includes multiple design changes, composition shifts, mint marks, varieties, and errors. It allows someone to start small, with coins found in change, and gradually build a collection of historical depth and artistic beauty. The 1980 penny is one of those gateway coins, a common date that becomes the foundation for deeper exploration. It invites questions: what came before it? What came after? What makes some coins valuable and others not? What stories lie in the small details most people never see? This is why the coin's supposed value of $654 million, while clearly exaggerated, still resonates with people. It is not about the literal number. It is about the dream that something so humble could be worth so much. It is the same dream that drives people to check their attic for lost treasures, to buy lottery tickets, to pan for gold in rivers. It is the hope that fortune might come from the unexpected, that value might be hiding in plain sight. And in a way, the 1980 penny delivers on that dream, not in financial terms, but in emotional ones. It offers the thrill of discovery, the satisfaction of knowledge, the joy of preservation. It turns the mundane into the meaningful, the forgotten into the treasured, the overlooked into the celebrated. So when you find a 1980 penny in your change, pause for a moment. Hold it up to the light. Look at the fine lines of Lincoln's face, the symmetry of the memorial, the sharpness of the date. Feel the weight in your fingers, the coolness of the metal, the slight ridge of the rim. Think about where it has been, whose hands it has passed through, what moments in history it has witnessed. Remember that billions were made, but none are quite like the one you are holding. And know that in that tiny disc of copper lies a story bigger than money, a story of art, industry, history, and humanity, all captured in a single cent. The 1980 penny also gives us an entry point into the fascinating world of collectors and auctions, where tiny coins command prices that seem unimaginable to the casual observer. When people hear that a coin valued at 1 cent could sell for thousands of dollars, they sometimes shake their heads in disbelief, but within the numismatic community, it makes perfect sense. Condition, rarity, error, and demand create a marketplace where even the smallest differences in strike or preservation can mean the difference between a coin being worth pocket change or being worth a down payment on a home. The 1980 cent exists in such a marketplace, with ordinary examples being nearly worthless and extraordinary specimens becoming treasures. Auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Great Collections have seen Lincoln cents cross their blocks at astonishing prices. While many of these are earlier wheat cents or rare doubled dies, modern coins like the 1980 cent are not excluded. A gem example graded MS67 red can fetch hundreds or even thousands, especially if it is certified as one of the finest known. Collectors pay premiums for such pieces because they are competing not only for the coin itself but for status, for bragging rights, for the chance to own the best of the best. And in the case of error coins, the premiums can climb even higher. Imagine a 1980 cent with a dramatic off-center strike, one where Lincoln's portrait is missing half of its features and the date is shifted into a crescent moon at the edge of the blank. That error transforms the coin from ordinary to extraordinary, a one-of-a-kind piece of minting history that excites collectors far more than a perfect strike ever could. The stories of these auction results ripple outward, fueling the dreams of ordinary people. Every time a headline announces that a penny has sold for tens of thousands of dollars, curiosity spreads. People empty their jars of change, sift through their drawers, examine the coins in their pockets. For many, the 1980 penny becomes the first coin they check. They tilt it under the light, squinting at the date, searching for doubling, testing the sound against the tabletop, weighing it in their hands. Most find nothing unusual, but some discover small details, a die crack, a rim error, a misaligned strike, and they are hooked. They become part of the global community of treasure hunters united by the thrill of the search, This phenomenon illustrates something profound about human psychology, the way we assign value to stories, rarity, and possibility. A coin like the 1980 penny is valuable not only for what it is but for what it could be. It could be a rare error. It could be in pristine condition. It could be the coin that completes a set. It could be the key to a collection. It could be the spark that starts a lifelong passion. And in the collective imagination, it could even be the mythical penny worth $654 million. Whether or not such a coin exists is beside the point. The idea itself is powerful enough to inspire action, attention, and wonder. But beyond the marketplace and the psychology lies something even deeper: the legacy of the penny itself. For more than a century, the 1-cent coin has been a cornerstone of American currency. It has carried the image of Abraham Lincoln since 1909, longer than any other figure has appeared on a U.S. coin. It has seen the nation through wars, depressions, booms, and technological revolutions. And yet, its future is uncertain. Inflation has eroded its buying power to almost nothing. It costs more to produce than its face value. Many argue that it should be retired, following the example of Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. If that day comes, the 1980 cent and all other pennies will suddenly transform from circulating currency into relics of the past, artifacts of a vanished system. Collectors know this, and it shapes their behavior. Some are stockpiling pre-1982 copper pennies, betting that the metal content alone will someday justify the effort. Others are focused on building complete datainment sets before the penny disappears. And still others are zeroing in on specific years like 1980, preserving rolls and bags as time capsules. They understand that once the penny is gone, demand for these coins will spike, not because they are rare, but because they embody nostalgia, history, and the tangible memory of money as it once was. There is also the cultural dimension of the penny, which makes the 1980 cent resonate even beyond numismatics. The penny is the coin we use in sayings. A penny for your thoughts, a penny saved is a penny earned. It is the coin people toss into fountains while making wishes, the coin children press into their first piggy banks, the coin lovers flatten on train tracks as keepsakes. It is humble, but it is also symbolic. To imagine a world without pennies is to imagine the fading of these traditions, and so each surviving penny takes on greater symbolic weight. The 1980 cent, produced in such vast numbers, ensures that these traditions linger a little longer, even as the world moves toward a cashless economy, and it is in that symbolic role that the claim of $654 million gains its poetic truth. The 1980 penny is not worth that sum in the market, but in terms of the collective memories, the wishes, the hopes, the stories, and the cultural resonance it carries, it is indeed worth more than money can measure. It is a coin that carries value not in dollars but in meaning, and meaning often surpasses wealth. So when a collector places a 1980 penny under a magnifying glass, they are not just examining metal. They are looking into the face of Lincoln, into the artistry of Victor David Brenner's design, into the mint's decision-making, into the economy of copper, into the psychology of collecting, into the marketplace of rarity, into the traditions of American culture, into the future of currency itself. They are seeing all of these layers stacked within a coin smaller than a thumbnail, and that is where the magic lies. The market today continues to reflect this duality. Circulated 1980 cents are still worth face value. High-grade examples are worth hundreds. Errors can be worth thousands. And the myth of the multi-million-dollar penny ensures that the coin remains in the public consciousness, a subject of endless videos, articles, and debates. This constant attention ensures that the coin never fades into obscurity. It remains alive, circulating not only in pockets but in stories, in imaginations, and in dreams, and that, ultimately, is the legacy of the 1980 penny. It is not the numbers, though the numbers are impressive. It is not the auctions, though they are exciting. It is not even the copper content, though that connects it to millennia of human history. It is the way this simple coin, struck by the billions, has become a vessel for meaning far larger than itself. It is a reminder that sometimes the smallest things carry the greatest weight, and that value is not always measured in money but in the stories we tell, the memories we hold, and the dreams we chase. If you really want to understand the 1980 penny, you have to put yourself back into that year and imagine what life was like when those coins were new. A single cent meant more in the everyday economy than it does now. You could still find penny candy in corner stores, where children with small change could leave with a paper bag full of treats. A penny could still make a difference at a vending machine when you were a nickel short, and it could still be stacked up by the handful to buy a newspaper. People saved them in jars and tins, kids scoured sidewalks for them, and parents gave them out as small rewards. The 1980 cent was a tool of daily commerce, an unremarkable but ever-present companion in the pockets and purses of millions of Americans. Picture a cashier in a grocery store in 1980. Prices were higher than they had been in the 60s or 70s, but the cash registers still rang with coins as change was counted back by hand. If your total came to $4.99, the clerk placed a penny in your palm. It was the coin that completed transactions, the unit that made everything balance out. Customers didn't argue over pennies then, they used them constantly. The 1980 cent was passed across counters thousands of times a day in every city and town, its bright copper glinting under fluorescent lights. It was ordinary, but it was necessary. Now imagine children collecting bottles for return deposits. They'd carry their nickels and dimes and sometimes a few pennies jingling in their pockets. They'd use those coins to buy baseball cards, comic books, bubblegum. A 1980 penny could have been part of one of those trades, slipped across a counter to a smiling shopkeeper, becoming part of a child's memory of a simple joy. Or think of payphones, lined up on city blocks and in shopping centers. A call might cost a dime, but if you only had 9 cents, that single 1980 penny could make the difference between hearing a friend's voice or walking away in frustration. Small amounts mattered, and so the penny still mattered. Even in banks, pennies were gathered, rolled, and counted. Kids and adults alike would sit at kitchen tables stacking 50 pennies into paper wrappers, securing them, and bringing them to the bank to exchange for dollars. Among those rolls could have been 1980 cents, still bright and new, lined up edge to edge like soldiers in formation. Many of those rolls were forgotten, tucked away in drawers or boxes, and today when they resurface they reveal coins that look untouched by time, coins that transport us back to that moment of saving and storing. The act of rolling pennies was a ritual of thrift, a reminder that every cent counted, and yet, even as pennies carried weight in everyday transactions, 1980 was also a year of change. Prices were rising, inflation was eroding the buying power of money, and people were beginning to question whether the penny still had a place. But they still kept them, still used them, still filled piggy banks and coin jars. A 1980 penny might have been the first coin dropped into a child's bank, the one that clinked against the ceramic and started a habit of saving. That child might remember the sound and the weight of the coin as something significant, a symbol of being trusted with money, a small step into adulthood. Beyond commerce, pennies played roles in rituals and traditions. People tossed them into fountains while making wishes. Couples pressed them into soft asphalt or left them as tokens of luck. Pennies were placed on railroad tracks, where the pressure of passing trains flattened them into souvenirs. Schoolchildren compared their shininess, trying to trade older, dull coins for newer, brighter ones. In every one of these small acts, pennies held meaning beyond their value. A 1980 cent, still shining from the mint, could have been the coin that carried a whispered wish into the water, or the coin that came back flattened and warm from a train track, carried home as a keepsake. And in millions of households, pennies piled up. They collected in coffee cans, mason jars, dresser drawers, and glove compartments. People didn't always spend them right away, they lingered, accumulating in little hoards that told stories of daily life. Those jars were time capsules, filled with coins from many years, and among them the 1980 cent lay waiting, its copper surface aging slowly, darkening with oxidation, yet still holding the memory of its minting. Decades later, when someone tips out a jar and begins to sort through, the sight of a 1980 coin can trigger a flood of associations, a reminder of that year, that era, that time when the penny was still an active part of the rhythm of daily commerce. The personal stories tied to pennies are endless. One person might remember pressing a penny into the palm of a loved one as a charm before a journey. Another might remember saving pennies to buy a toy, counting and recounting them with anticipation. Another might remember a grandparent patiently teaching them to recognize dates and landmarks, passing down the basics of collecting. And in all of these memories, a coin like the 1980 penny could have been the star. Its role was not grand, but it was constant, and in its constancy it became woven into the fabric of daily life. That is why, even as the penny has lost its spending power today, it has gained cultural power. People look back at it not only as money but as a piece of their own personal histories. They keep them as keepsakes, souvenirs, reminders of parents, grandparents, childhoods, or special years. A 1980 penny might sit in a drawer for decades, worth only a cent but never thrown away, because it is connected to memory. That human instinct to keep, to preserve, to remember, is what elevates such coins beyond their face value. And when we talk about the myth of the penny worth hundreds of millions of dollars, it becomes clear that the myth itself is an extension of this instinct. The story spreads not because people believe every penny is worth that much, but because they want to believe that the coins they already hold, the ones in jars and pockets, the ones tied to their memories, might secretly be treasures. The 1980 cent is the perfect vessel for this dream, because it is common enough that almost everyone has seen one, and yet special enough that in the right condition or with the right error, it can indeed be worth far more than a cent. So when you hold a 1980 penny and think about what it once bought, the hands it passed through, the jars it filled, the memories it created, you begin to see that its value is far more than monetary. It is a thread in the fabric of American life, a copper witness to the way people lived, spent, saved, and dreamed in the year 1980. And in that sense, every single one is priceless. To understand the 1980 penny in its fullest sense, it helps to step outside of the borders of the United States and look at how other nations have treated their smallest denominations. For as long as humans have used coins, there has been a smallest piece, the humble unit that seems insignificant yet is absolutely essential in rounding out commerce. In ancient Rome, it was the as, a bronze coin that allowed everyday citizens to buy food and goods. In medieval Europe, tiny copper farthings or deniers were struck to serve the poor and to allow precise accounting in a world where silver dominated higher denominations. Everywhere that coinage developed, people insisted on a smallest unit, because it symbolized inclusivity in trade. Even those with only a little wealth could participate. The American penny fits perfectly into this tradition, and the 1980 cent is one of its most visible modern representatives. When you compare it to the British penny, for example, you see both similarities and differences. The British one-penny coin also features a respected leader, Queen Elizabeth II in 1980, and it also carried a value so small that its use was often questioned. In Canada, the cent coin mirrored America's, featuring maple leaves instead of Lincoln, and by 1980 millions were produced each year. In Mexico, the centavo filled the same role, and in Germany, the pfennig served as the equivalent. Each of these tiny copper or bronze coins carried almost no power in terms of buying, but they carried immense symbolic weight as reminders that every unit mattered, every transaction could be exact, and even the smallest pieces of metal could represent national identity. What makes the United States penny especially interesting is its connection to Abraham Lincoln. While many countries placed monarchs, coats of arms, or national symbols on their lowest denominations, the U.S. put one of its greatest presidents on the smallest coin. It is a paradox that fascinates collectors worldwide. The man who led a nation through its most profound crisis and preserved its union is remembered every day on the humblest coin in circulation. The 1980 penny carries that paradox forward. To hold it is to hold Lincoln's steady gaze in miniature, to feel history compressed into copper. It is not only a unit of currency, it is a memorial that millions carried in their pockets simultaneously. In Japan, coins as small as the 1 yen piece serve a similar cultural function. Struck in aluminum, light as a feather, the 1 yen is often seen as worthless but is still treasured by children who use it in their first purchases. In India, the paisa once served the same role, though inflation has rendered it obsolete. In Italy before the euro, the lira system produced tiny denominations that seemed absurdly small, yet they persisted as part of the rhythm of commerce. And in all of these cases, As with the 1980 cent, once the smallest unit is abolished, nostalgia immediately follows. People hoard them, remember them, and suddenly attach meanings that go beyond economics. For American collectors, this global perspective strengthens the case for cherishing the penny. They see that in every culture, the smallest coin eventually disappears, and when it does, it transforms from everyday money into a collectible symbol of a vanished world. The 1980 penny is already halfway along this path. Though still technically legal tender, its purchasing power is almost non-existent, and the debate over whether to retire it grows louder every year. In Canada, the penny was retired in 2012, and instantly rolls of old Canadian cents became desirable keepsakes. Australians abandoned their 1-cent coin in 1992, and now collectors scramble for high-grade examples. New Zealand followed a similar path. Americans know that their penny's turn will come, and when it does, coins like the 1980 cent will suddenly gain a second life as objects of nostalgia, culture, and memory. Beyond nostalgia, there is also the question of design. When you look at the reverse of the 1980 cent, with its Lincoln Memorial, you are seeing a uniquely American approach to symbolism. The coin connects the image of Lincoln on the obverse to the monument built in his honor, a pairing that reinforces the message of memory and reverence. Few other nations link the portrait of a leader with their memorial in this way. It is almost as if the penny serves as a portable shrine, reminding everyone who spends it of Lincoln's enduring presence. When international collectors compare this to their own coins, they recognize the artistic and cultural uniqueness of the US cent. It becomes more than a piece of money, it becomes a statement about values. The global numismatic market reflects this. Collectors from around the world pursue US pennies not only because they are affordable entry points into American coinage, but also because they carry iconic imagery that transcends borders. The 1980 penny is one of the most accessible, produced in huge numbers and still found in circulation, and yet in pristine grades or with dramatic errors, it becomes a coveted prize. The fact that such an ordinary coin can attract global attention is a testament to its cultural reach. A German collector may never have spent a US penny in daily life, but they may own a 1980 cent as part of their collection, a token of America's economic and cultural power in the late 20th century. This international perspective also highlights how myths spread. Stories of a penny worth hundreds of millions of dollars do not stop at America's borders. They ripple outward through the internet, sparking curiosity in every country where coins are collected. Someone in India, someone in Brazil, someone in South Africa may read the story and immediately begin examining their change. The myth becomes global, and the 1980 penny becomes a worldwide symbol of hidden treasure. Its fame grows not only from its actual value but from its perceived possibility, and that perception is multiplied across languages, cultures, and traditions. So when we talk about the 1980 cent today, we are not just talking about an American coin. We are talking about a participant in a worldwide narrative of small coins, of lowest denominations, of symbols that outgrow their monetary function. It is part of a lineage stretching back to the as of Rome, the deniers of France, the farthings of England, the pfennigs of Germany, the centavos of Latin America, the yen of Japan, the paisa of India. It is part of a global story of how humanity insists on giving meaning to the smallest things, how we find symbolism and memory in objects that most dismiss as worthless. The 1980 penny is America's chapter in that story, and when you hold one in your hand, you are not only holding a piece of American history, you are holding a piece of world history, a symbol of how people everywhere, in every age, have needed and cherished the smallest coin. That is why it endures, that is why it inspires, and that is why, in the collective imagination, it can be worth more than money can measure.